happens when a beloved British acting legend sits down for what should be a warm, friendly chat, only to find himself under attack. In just 34 seconds, one reckless comment would turn a respected TV presenter into the most hated woman in Britain and send shockwaves through the entertainment industry still felt today. Michael Caine adjusted his tie as he settled into the bright orange sofa of loose women. The legendary actor. The man from the Italian Job, Alfie, The Dark Knight, was there to promote his new autobiography. What should have been a light-hearted 20-minute segment was about to become one of the most explosive moments in British daytime television history. The studio audience applauded as the cameras rolled live. Opposite Michael sat the four hosts. Denise Welch, outspoken, sharp-tongued, always ready to stir controversy. Ruth Langsford, the professional, trying to keep things civil. Colleen Nolan, visibly nervous, clutching her notes. And Jane Moore, watching quietly, sensing something was about to go wrong. "So, Michael," Denise began with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your new book talks about your humble beginnings. You grew up poor in South London, didn't you?" Michael nodded. "That's right. My father worked in a fish market. My mother cleaned houses. We didn't have much, but we had love. Those values shaped who I became." "How inspiring," Ruth said warmly. "A real rags-to-riches story." But Denise wasn't done. Her tone sharpened. "Yes, but some might say you've forgotten where you came from. Living in a mansion now, haven't you become part of the very elite you once looked up at from below?" The question hung in the air. Michael blinked, surprised but composed. "I've never forgotten my roots, Denise. Success doesn't change who you are inside." Denise scoffed. "Oh, please. You live in a multi-million-pound house. You probably spend more on a bottle of wine than most people earn in a month. How can you possibly relate to ordinary working people anymore?" The studio fell silent. Colleen shifted uncomfortably. Ruth tried to interject. "Denise, I think what Michael's saying is—" But Denise cut her off. She leaned forward, voice rising. "Values? What values? You moved to America for tax reasons, didn't you? Running away from paying your fair share while British families struggle to put food on the table." Michael's jaw tightened, his voice calm but cold. "I moved to America for work opportunities, and I've always paid every penny of tax I owe, wherever I've lived. I resent the implication that I've cheated the system." "Resent it all you like," Denise fired back. "The fact remains, while you were living it up in Hollywood, real people were suffering through austerity. But I suppose that doesn't matter when you're dining with movie stars and politicians." The audience murmured, uneasy. A few voices shouted in Michael's defense. Denise ignored them. Jane Moore finally spoke. "Denise, maybe we could focus on Michael's career instead of his bank account." But Michael raised a hand. "It's all right, Jane." He turned to Denise, his tone firm, deliberate. "I've worked for over 60 years in this business. I've created jobs for thousands, paid millions in taxes, supported charity. If that makes me elite, then I'm proud to be elite." Denise laughed mockingly. "There it is. The mask slips. You admit you think you're better than the rest of us." "I never said that," Michael replied, his voice edged with steel. "But I won't be lectured about character by someone who knows nothing about mine." The air was electric. Ruth tried again to move on. "Perhaps we can talk about your new film, Michael." But Denise pressed harder. "Oh, yes. Another film where you play the wise old mentor, I suppose. Don't you think it's time to step aside and let younger actors have a chance?" Colleen gasped audibly. The audience booed. Michael's composure finally cracked. "Denise, I've supported younger actors all my life. I've mentored dozens who've gone on to be stars. What exactly have you done to help the next generation?" Denise's eyes flashed. "I don't need to justify myself to you. But at least I'm honest about who I am." Denise snapped. "I don't pretend to be some working-class hero while living in luxury." Michael's reply came swift and cutting. "And I don't pretend to be a journalist while conducting ambush interviews." For the first time, his voice rose. "This was supposed to be about my book," he said sharply, "not a character assassination." Ruth leaned forward, desperate to regain control. "Let's all take a breath here But Denise wasn't listening. She was locked in now, feeding on the confrontation, her eyes bright with defiance. "Character assassination?" she scoffed, half standing, pointing across the coffee table. "I'm just asking the questions real people want answered. Why should we celebrate someone who abandoned Britain the moment it suited him?" "Abandoned Britain?" Michael's composure finally cracked. His eyes flashed. "I've represented Britain around the world for decades. I've been an ambassador for British cinema and British values wherever I've gone. How dare you question my loyalty to my country?" The audience erupted in applause, but Denise only sneered. "Oh, listen to them clapping," she said with a bitter laugh, gesturing toward the crowd. "So easily impressed by a posh accent and a few old films. But I'm not buying it, Michael. I see right through this act." Michael's expression darkened. The calm, gentlemanly restraint was gone. "Act? This isn't an act, Denise. This is who I am. A working man who made something of himself through hard work and determination." "Working man?" Denise practically shrieked, her voice cracking with scorn. "You haven't done a real day's work in decades. Standing in front of cameras and reading lines isn't work. Real work is what nurses do, what teachers do, what shop assistants do. You just play pretend, for millions of pounds." Jane Moore couldn't take it anymore. "Denise, that's completely unfair," she said, voice trembling with disbelief. "Acting is a legitimate profession. It takes skill, discipline, and years of dedication." "Don't defend him, Jane," Denise snapped, turning on her colleague. "You're all so starstruck you can't see what's right in front of you. This man represents everything that's wrong with our society. The rich getting richer while the poor get poorer." Colleen, quiet until now, spoke gently but firmly. "Michael has always been gracious in every interview I've ever seen. He's a gentleman and a professional. This is completely out of line." "Out of line?" Denise spun toward her, eyes blazing. "What's out of line is pretending celebrities like him deserve our respect just because they're famous. I'm asking the hard questions nobody else has the guts to ask." Michael leaned back in his chair, studying her with the cold precision of a man who had seen hundreds like her. People who mistook cruelty for courage. When he spoke again, his voice dropped to a quiet, dangerous calm. "I think I understand what this is really about, Denise. This isn't about my taxes, or where I live. This is about you, about your own insecurities." "My insecurities?" Denise laughed harshly, almost choking on her words. "That's rich, coming from someone who's spent his whole life pretending to be other people because he can't stand being himself." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone!" The audience's mood had fully turned. But Denise pressed on, louder, angrier, drunk on her own defiance. "You want to know what I think?" she shouted. "I think you're a fraud, Michael Caine. I think you've been coasting on your reputation for years, taking roles from more deserving actors, living off past glories, contributing nothing meaningful to society." Ruth Langsford looked mortified. She knew there was no saving this. The interview was off the rails. "Denise, please," she said quietly. "Let's try to keep this professional." "Professional?" Denise whirled on her, the fury spilling over. "What's professional about giving celebrities like him a free pass to spout their privileged nonsense? For once, I'm being honest on this show. Instead of kissing up to every guest who walks through that door, that was the breaking point." Michael stood up slowly, the studio lights catching the steel in his eyes. Even at his age, his presence filled the room. The chatter stopped. "I've been in this business for over 60 years, he said, voice steady but lethal. "And I've never encountered such unprofessional, disrespectful behavior from a television presenter. Your conduct is disgraceful. Don't you dare call me young lady," Denise snapped, leaping to her feet. That's exactly the kind of condescending attitude I'm talking about. You think you can dismiss me because I'm a woman and I'm younger than you. I'm dismissing you, Michael shot back coldly, because you're behaving like a spoiled child having a tantrum. Age and gender have nothing to do with it. Your behavior would be unacceptable from anyone. The audience erupted in applause. Thunderous, unanimous. Several people stood, cheering. Others shouted for Denise to apologize. And for the first time all morning, Denise Welch looked uncertain. But she was beyond reason now, her face flushed with rage and humiliation. A spoiled child? Denise screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Michael. You're calling me a spoiled child? You're the one who's had everything handed to you on a silver platter. You're the one who thinks the world owes you respect just because you're Michael Caine. Denise, please. Jane Moore pleaded, her voice breaking through the chaos. You need to calm down. This is live television. Think about what you're saying. But Denise didn't think. She couldn't. The red light of the live camera only seemed to fuel her fury. I don't care if it's live television, she shouted. Someone has to hold these so-called legends accountable for their arrogance and selfishness. Someone needs to speak truth to power. Michael shook his head slowly. Not angry now, but disappointed. When he spoke, his tone was calm, almost sorrowful. Truth to power? He repeated quietly. You're attacking a man who came from nothing, who worked his way up through sheer grit, who's employed thousands of people, entertained millions more. If you think that makes me the enemy, Denise, then you've lost all perspective. Lost perspective? Denise's voice cracked into near hysteria. You live in a different world from the rest of us. You have no idea what real people go through. You sit in your ivory tower looking down on everyone else, expecting us to be grateful for the privilege of your presence. Colleen Nolan's eyes filled with tears. Watching her colleague unravel on live TV was unbearable. Denise, please, she whispered. You're embarrassing yourself. And the show. Embarrassing myself? Denise turned on her, her face twisted with fury. The only thing embarrassing here is how you're all bowing and scraping to this has-been actor who probably doesn't even remember our names. That did it. Michael's composure, honed over 6 decades of interviews, rehearsals, and stage lights, finally broke. Has-been? He thundered, his voice booming through the studio with such force that even the cameras seemed to flinch. How dare you speak to me like that? I've achieved more in my career than you could dream of in 10 lifetimes. The studio froze. No one moved. No one breathed. The silence was electric, broken only by the hum of the cameras still rolling, capturing every second of this disaster. Ruth, Jane, and Colleen sat in stunned silence, unable to comprehend how a harmless book interview had collapsed into televised warfare. Michael stood tall over the orange sofa, chest heaving, eyes locked on Denise with something between anger and disbelief. Denise stared back, wide-eyed, momentarily stunned that someone had finally pushed back. Then from the front row, an elderly woman's voice rang out clear as a bell. Good on you, Michael. The studio erupted. Applause thundered through the air as the audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, calling out. She's out of order. Leave the man alone. The sound was deafening. But Denise, her pride mortally wounded, only smiled. A sharp, venomous smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, how touching, she sneered. The great Michael Caine loses his temper, and suddenly he's the hero. Well, I'm not impressed. If anything, it proves my point. About your arrogance. Michael's eyes narrowed. His voice dropped into something colder, sharper. My arrogance, he said quietly. You've spent 15 minutes hurling insults, questioning my integrity, and mocking my life's work. And I'm the arrogant one? I've been asking legitimate questions. Denise snapped, but her voice wavered. The crowd's disapproval was starting to sink in. Questions? Michael shot back. You've made accusations. You've hurled abuse. You've behaved like a tabloid journalist, chasing a headline. Ruth stepped in again, voice trembling. Maybe we should take a short break. No. Michael interrupted firmly, his voice slicing through the noise. I won't be taking a break. I came here as a guest, expecting basic courtesy and respect. Instead, I've been subjected to a personal attack by someone with a clear agenda. Denise gave a bitter laugh. My agenda? My agenda is holding people like you accountable. My agenda is making sure celebrities don't think they can walk onto this show and get worshipped without answering hard questions. Hard questions? Michael echoed, his tone laced with contempt. You haven't asked one. You've spat venom, made it personal, and turned professionalism into a spectacle. There's nothing noble about that, the audience cheered again. Loud, sustained applause that drowned out Denise's sharp breathing. But she wasn't done. Not yet. At least I'm honest about what I'm doing, she hissed. I'm not hiding behind a carefully crafted public image like you. I say what I think, and if that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they should ask why. That was when Jane Moore finally lost her patience. Denise, stop, she burst out, her voice cracking with anger. You're not being honest. You're being cruel. You've turned this interview into a personal vendetta. Michael came here to talk about his book, and you've humiliated both him and this entire show. Denise whirled on her, eyes wild. Stay out of this, Jane. Denise snapped viciously, her voice trembling with rage. You're just as starstruck as the rest of them. She spat at Jane. You can't see past the fame to the real man underneath. Colleen, who had been quietly crying through the confrontation, finally found her voice. The real man underneath, she said through tears, is a gentleman who's been nothing but gracious, despite your appalling behavior. You should be ashamed of yourself. Ashamed? Denise whirled on her tearful colleague, her fury almost feral. I should be ashamed for doing my job, for asking the questions that matter, for not being intimidated by his reputation. Michael had heard enough. With the composure of a man who had lived a lifetime in front of cameras, he began to remove his microphone. Slow, deliberate, precise. I've been in this business for over 6 decades, he said, his voice calm but cold as steel. I've worked with the greatest directors, the most talented actors, and the most professional broadcasters in the world. But I have never, ever, encountered such disgraceful conduct from a television presenter. The studio went utterly silent. Everyone knew they were witnessing something historic, a beloved national treasure about to walk away from live television. In the genteel world of British daytime TV, this simply did not happen. Denise seemed to realize, too late, how far she'd gone. But pride is a dangerous thing. Fine, walk away, she said, forcing a shaky laugh. That's what people like you do when faced with real questions. You run back to your comfortable bubble where everyone tells you how wonderful you are. Michael paused, his microphone in hand, and looked at her with quiet pity. Real questions, he said softly. You want to know what a real question would be? A real question would be about my 60-year career, about the films I've made, about the book I came here to discuss. A real question would show preparation, knowledge, respect for your guest and for your audience. He placed the microphone gently on the coffee table. But you're not interested in real questions, are you, Denise? You're interested in drama, in headlines, in putting on a show for the cameras. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded. But you've also shown everyone exactly who you are. Applause began to spread across the studio. Not the wild cheering from earlier, but a slow, reverent clap that carried the weight of sorrow and admiration. They weren't celebrating a victory. They were acknowledging a tragedy. A dignified man had been dragged to the brink, by someone incapable of basic decency. Ruth, Jane, and Colleen sat frozen, their faces pale. They knew what this meant. The reputation of their show was crumbling, live, in front of millions. "Don't you dare lecture me about who I am!" Denise screamed, her voice raw now, stripped of all control. "You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. You think you can just dismiss me like some nobody?" Michael straightened his jacket, his expression weary, almost sorrowful. "I'm not dismissing you because you're a nobody, Denise," he said quietly. "I'm dismissing you because of how you've chosen to behave today. You had the opportunity to conduct a meaningful interview with someone who's lived through the golden age of British cinema. Instead, you chose to turn it into a circus." He turned and began walking toward the exit, each step deliberate, composed, final. With the same grace and quiet power that had defined his greatest roles, Michael Caine left the set of Loose Women. The audience rose again, this time in a standing ovation that thundered through the studio. Even the camera operators stood, applauding silently, as he reached the doorway. Michael paused, hand on the frame, and looked back one last time. "Good luck with your show, ladies," he said evenly. "You're going to need it." And with that, one of Britain's greatest living actors walked out of the studio, leaving behind a presenter whose career would never recover from 34 seconds of pure, unfiltered malice.